So I think the question that everyone wants to know is that your hand pouring the coffee in the welcome video?
I didn't even see the welcome video. And therefore, no, it's not my hand. Well, what's up, everyone? Welcome to Coffee Convos.
Welcome. We hope you guys grabbed your cup of coffee. I'm actually drinking tea.
You're drinking
I'm
tea today. She's
cheating.
breaking the rules. If we haven't met before, my name is Christian. I am one of our online campus pastors, and I'm excited to spend about half an hour with you today. And I am joined by the ever lovely Miss Amanda Smith. Mrs. Amanda Smith.
I worked hard to get this.
You
Mrs.
worked very
title.
hard to get the Mrs. title.
I am the Mrs. to you, by the way.
You put a lot of work in. A lot of performance reviews didn't go well, but eventually you leveled up.
Oh, Lord.
Just kidding.
Luckily, this week isn't about marriage.
It's not. It's about friendship. Even worse. No. What's up, everyone? Welcome. Thank you for joining us to Coffee Convos, where we spend some time unpacking scripture that our church, Life Christian Church, has been focusing on for this past week and helping ourselves to understand it more and apply it to our lives. We're so happy that you're joining us. Definitely jump into the chat, say hello to everyone who's joining and to us as well, so we can see that you are with us. And all throughout, feel more than welcome to post in your thoughts.
Yeah.
We'll address some of them, pull them onto the screen, ask questions about what's going on in the scripture, ask questions about what our thoughts are on a specific topic. Every single week, we are live Fridays at 9 a.m. Eastern time, aside from last week because it was Thanksgiving week. So I guess not every week, but almost every single week on Facebook Live and YouTube Live. And you can watch it afterwards as well. How are you doing today, Amanda?
I'm doing very well. I'm enjoying the Christmas season that we're in. I can't believe that we're already week 2 in Advent this Sunday.
Know.
We've got our little pencil tree back here, our snow-tipped pencil tree.
Our fake tree.
But I love it, even though it looks cheap,
it's a little depressing. No ornaments this year?
No, it's just it's too much stuff to accumulate, and we're here for 3 years. But
for those who don't know, we've just moved to a flat in London, so
yes, we're in London.
Our storage space isn't what it should be, but
well, it's nice to declutter.
Yeah,
I think.
Yeah, in part there are positives, there are negatives.
Yeah.
All right. Well, so today we are focusing on the topic of friendship, as discussed in Proverbs.
Yes.
And there's a lot of great verses. So we're going to go over 3 different verses today that hopefully will inspire us in our relationships with people who aren't family or aren't spouses. We know you can have, we'll use friendship colloquially, like you're my friend, right? Even if it's a spouse, which maybe says something important about that relationship. But these are specific relationships that are not covenantal in the sense of, it's a spouse or it's not, family that you were birthed into, in the unique place that those relationships have in our lives and how they're distinct from other relationships as well. I'm not sure what your thoughts are, and jump into the chat, everyone, as well, and give your thoughts. But it seems like friendships are in a lot of relationships, but friendships are in a unique place in our world right now, or maybe in the context that we've lived in, that might be a little bit distinct from how it's been in, let's say, previous generations, in light of maybe the advent of technology or social fragmentation of the world. Whereas, generally speaking, you might be spending your free time with friends or someone like that. Now you can kind of be released into like an escapism experiences of, I'm going to watch TV on Friday night instead of go out with people, or I'm going to kind of quell your boredom of, I have a Friday night off. There are a lot of other opportunities that friendships perhaps filled that space, but now they don't fill that space. I hear lots of people talking about how relationships at work are different, people not hanging out with friends from work, and a sense of potential loneliness when it comes to friendships. I don't know what your thoughts might be on that.
I have a lot of thoughts on it, actually.
Oh no! Someone start the countdown clock, a timer.
I promise I won't go over time. No, but it's true, because I think even culturally too, just the way that the world has changed. We've got technology now. Our jobs are remote. you're not in the same kind of social circles that you were, I would say, I don't know, 30 years ago. Where it's it's easy to think about making friends within a certain context, like at school, or if you're in a common interests or something, but or at work even. But like I said, with us being in an era of social media, and also the world looks different around the workplace these days, especially after the pandemic, thinking around working remotely, you're not in the same physical space as other people, and so friendships don't develop as organically as I would say they should or even used to. And so we've turned to other methods of, I guess, garnering friends or trying to gain friendships that I think have its own challenges, even though there are some pros to it, and some positives to, I guess, increasing our pool of friend choices. There's definitely a lot of negatives to that method as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, it seems like they're even taking place in different kinds of ways. You can have friends that are long distance now via text,
Hmm.
or a lot of my close. I mean, I've been blessed to have a lot of great friends, um, and kind of a circle of like 5 guys who I've been really close with for a long time. And for the past, 5 years or so, only one of them, 2 of them have been within any kind of proximity of me
Right.
geographically.
Right.
And so it's just a different kind of
Which I would say is
relationship.
the pro to what technology has done for us.
Hmm.
Like, I have two really close friends who don't live in the same state as me or the same country as me, and I would not have been able to cultivate or nurture that friendship over the years had it not been for my telephone or technology or Facebook or
Yeah.
whatever, all those things. Um,
Video
but
games.
what?
Video
Oh,
games.
for you, for sure, video games.
In a season, you know?
But I grew up, which I didn't have a cell phone until I was a freshman in college, and then also something like Facebook came out when I was also in college and was only open to college students at the time, which is so weird to think about, right? Like, Facebook was only open to colleges. So that to me was just like this whole new idea about like how to be connected with others in through friendship. But that's when I think friendship started to get a little tiny bit watered down in terms of accumulating friends.
Hmm. Interesting.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's jump into our first scripture today from Proverbs. We'll be reading from Proverbs chapter 18, verse 24. I'll read it, and then why don't you respond to it with some thoughts,
Oh, okay.
Amanda? Okay, Proverbs 18, verse 24. One who has unreliable friends soon comes to ruin, but there is a friend who sticks closer than a brother. One has unreliable friends soon comes to ruin, but there is a friend who sticks closer than a brother. Amanda, why don't you unpack that for us a little bit?
Sure. So I guess to start, this is a very interesting scripture because there's seemingly two parts to it. So the first part talks about a man of many companions may come to ruin, right? But there's a friend who sticks closer than a brother. That's the second part. And something that we can just see just by looking at the scripture itself is that there's an emphasis on the plurality of friends in that first part, so that there's some sort of connection with that and something negative, which it says in scripture, ruin. And then there's a second part where it talks about a, a smaller number of friends. It's actually talking about one friend here who sticks closer than a brother. So it was interesting to dive into like what the meaning of that number actually meant. Um, so one thing that I did learn is that in Proverbs, the word friend is actually mentioned 9 times. So it's not that much, but what you can garner or what you can gain, I guess, from reading those scriptures about friendship, or where friend is actually mentioned, is that you have two types of friends. So you can infer that from these scriptures. And the first type of friend is the friend who exists because you have something to offer. So maybe that's association by popularity, right? Or maybe that's a material gift because it talks about money a lot, like, or giving gifts and you'll have many friends kind of thing. So it's talking about two types of friends, even in this scripture here. So that first half is that first description. So the friend who exists because you have something to offer. And then there's a second kind of friend that some of these scriptures kind of infer towards it. And it's a friend who exists due to genuine love and friendship. So this is the kind of friend that could be counted on. This is the friend that is there when you need them. So with Proverbs 18:24, so that first half where it's talking about that a man of many companions may come to you, that at first can be a little confusing because it might think like, oh, well, is that bad that I have a lot of friends? Like, am I doomed to ruin if I have over 10 or if it, like, what's the cutoff here? But I think what it's more so emphasizing is that type of friend. So, and also some obvious things that I think anyone can experience or from life experience can say that quantity of friends doesn't necessarily equate to quality of friends. So you could have a ton of friends, right? But then you could also still be lonely, or you can have a ton of friends and they're not there for you when you need them. So having the, I guess, the plurality, the having more and more friends doesn't necessarily mean that you're having true friendship. And then, and like I said earlier, that we're in an era of social media. So think about that and what our culture promotes, right? Garnering followers, garnering a ton of friends. But oftentimes that's incredibly superficial. There's a few of friends that can maybe be there for you in time. And you could again be in a chat room full of friends or are on some social media platform and still feel incredibly lonely.
Mm-hmm.
But then again, that second type of friend is that friend who sticks closer than a brother. So obviously, you think about a familial relationship, like a brother and a sister, or a brother and a brother, and you think that's the closest possible bond. Blood is thicker than water is a term you often hear to illustrate that. But what this scripture is saying, it's saying that there's actually a friend who can be closer than what we think is the closest bond. And there's, examples of that in scripture. The friendship between David and Jonathan was an example of what that friendship of being closer than a brother looked like. And, kind of going on to, and feel free to chime in whenever, but if I'm talking too much, but, it's funny because as I'm like reading the scripture, I'm thinking about stories, right? And I'm thinking about, parts of my life that relate to this. And I'm sure, if you're watching or listening, you have stories that are coming to mind of like a friend who sticks closer than brother, or you have stories that come to mind of when you were let down by a group of friends or people who you thought you could count on that you called your friends. But it's funny. So since obviously most of like Christian and I are living here in London, and new city, new country, we don't have any friends. So I actually took it upon myself to
Oh no.
take advantage of one of the social media platforms that helps you to make friends. And I joined Bumble.
Whoa, just stop there. Amanda's joined Bumble. Headline.
Bumble BFF. It's for friends. I don't know if any of y'all know about Bumble, but it's predominantly a dating site, but I'm not using it for that. It's for friendships. So
courting friends.
I've actually made a good friend through the app, and we've had a couple of hangouts already. She's had me over for dinner, and we've had really, really, really great conversations. And one of the stories that
Andrew De Silva goes,
Well, one of the stories that she shared
Let's
with
show
me.
this on the screen. Thank you, Andrew. Exactly. In response to Amanda.
Andrew, we're friends. You should trust me. I'm on there for friendship. But one of the stories that my friend shared with me really had me laughing, but it rang so true in today and kind of what this scripture is speaking to. So the way that Bumble BFF works is very similar to the way the app works. Like
so awkward.
You match with people with similar interests or similar likes. So you have to like swipe from people that you think you would match with. So you have all these matches.
What's your criteria? I'm just kidding. Don't get into it.
So you could have, I guess, I don't even know what it's called. That's how much I know about it. But I guess in your messages or whatever, this one column in the app shows like all of the people that you've matched with. And then you have to reach out to them. It's very, very weird. I've never done anything like this before. But what I've learned is that, so my friend was invited to a Thanksgiving dinner at another friend who she also met on Bumble BFF. And
So your friend that you met on Bumble BFF went to a Thanksgiving with another friend that she met on Bumble BFF.
yes. And then ironically, everyone
We
else
should get a sponsor from Bumble BFF right now.
and then everyone else at this dinner also had met on Bumble BFF, which is kind of hilarious. So what she came to discover very quickly after being at this dinner was that this friend wasn't really trying to I guess engage in any kind of meaningful conversation.
All of the friends there were from Bumble BFF too.
Yes,
Oh
literally.
my gosh.
So she quickly came to this conclusion that this woman was a friend collector, and that's the coin she termed, or the phrase she coined, which I thought was hilarious. But I am actually starting to realize that that's an actual thing. She just wanted a plethora of friends and really didn't work to create any kind of connection deeper than superficial conversation and hanging out. So needless to say, she did leave this dinner party, realizing that and being dissatisfied with it. But that's really what a lot of people, on social media or any kind of platform like that, like that's sadly a reality in our lives. And I
Mhm.
think it's easy to, say, oh, well, I'm exempt from that. But, I think it's important to realize, especially even after hearing, you know, Ben's talk last week on friendship. He was saying, sometimes, we have a whole list and standards of when we're dating or we're trying to look for a spouse, but do we even have standards for a friend? Like, what does that mean
Yeah.
to look for that second type of friend that looks closer?
Yeah, and we'll
than
get
your
into
brother?
more of like friend standards in a moment.
Yeah.
But I think that's so true. It's like what does that say about yourself or about other friends you might have? Because this goes both ways. What kind of friends are we receiving? Which is normally how we think about the friend stuff because it makes it about us. But what kind of friends are we being to other people as
Yeah.
well? We might be being bad friends.
Yeah.
And so maybe we're in a place where it's like, oh yeah, I have a lot of friends. And it's like you have a group of maybe like a circle of 20 people that you hang out with, 15
Mhm,
people.
mhm.
But who do you actually have those close relationships with? Who sticks closer than a brother?
Yeah.
And friends have an interesting spot. I don't even know what this means, but it's good to acknowledge where friends are people that are unique people in your life that you choose. You both choose to enter into the relationship with, and you choose to stay in the relationship with. Family's different in that you don't choose those relationships; you're born into those.
Mhm.
You generally don't opt out of those, though sometimes there are cases where something might necessitate that, or you make a bad decision and you opt out, and you shouldn't. Marriage, you choose to enter into it, but it's not a daily choice to stay in it. You do make the choice, but
Excuse me?
you are covenantally committed, though. It's a different kind of social
We're stuck. That's what
contract,
you're trying to
or
say.
yes, we're stuck. So friendships occupy that unique space. It's like,
Yeah.
how are you looking at those friendships and say, am I choosing to enter into
Yeah.
relationships that are meaningfully deep? Or am I just with like 15 people all the time having super light conversation? Or is the person that I think is my best friend has 30 other people who they would also say are their best
Yeah.
friend? And it's like, you know what? If I'm like, this might not be the person that I'm able to actually go to,
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
kind of doing like an audit of our relationships.
Yeah.
Okay. Proverbs. Oh, you want to say something?
No, I just thought it was funny because Ben mentioned, he's like, sometimes our
Ben, our
only
executive pastor who spoke
yeah,
last weekend.
sorry. Ben Staveley, in his message, he mentioned, and if you haven't seen it, I would encourage you to go watch it on YouTube. But basically, he said sometimes our only prerequisite for a friend is that they're another warm body.
Hmm.
And so it just kind of shows you just our natural human nature standards of just garnering a friend.
All right, here's a great comment I'm going to pull on the screen here from Timothy Frazier. Thank you so much for joining us today. Hope you're doing well. Great comment here. He says 100% in terms of agreement. I look at it like a dartboard. There are one or more friends in the bullseye that are deep friends, and more as you get farther from the center. That's a really great way to put that. I
Oh,
like
that
that a
is
lot.
really a
Yeah,
great
because when you're trying to
illustration.
hit the bullseye, you inevitably hit all
I
those
am
outside
so
parts
great
more.
at darts at getting it out on the edge and off the board.
Okay, off the board means failed friendship.
Oh.
Yeah. You stabbed the wrong spot. That's a great comment, Tim, and I completely agree.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that.
Yeah, and I think that's always a good thing to ask yourself is how many friends do I have that I think are close? I've heard different numbers in terms of
Oh,
how many
yeah.
close friends you
Uh-huh.
should have. think it's typically like 3 to 5. And normally there's a scaling of how close those 5 people are.
Right.
But you can only manage practically to have so many different friends.
That's
and so
true.
thinking about that for yourself, like, am I putting myself in a position to have really good friends by investing in a few and I've actually had like processes where I've really intentionally done that in my life.
That is something I've seen with you and some of your guy friends that I even admired and learned from on how to be a better friend, was how you were a friend to, some of your college football buddies. You took time to, even though you're far away, you would schedule phone calls with them. You would and sometimes you'd be like, hey, how long has it been since you talked to your friend? I was like, well, we don't really talk that. And I'm like, well, maybe I should be more intentional about this.
Well, and I think that there's something about friends where you can, this is tangential from the scripture, but friends where you can not talk to for a long time and you're still good friends with them, right?
Right. Like kind of pick up where you left off.
But I'll say one thing. This is just a personal thought. This is not from scripture. Is that I think sometimes that can be an excuse.
Yeah, I agree.
It's like, yeah, but we'll be great. And it's like, yeah, but what if you did schedule every other week to talk with them? Like, how much greater would your friendship and your relationship be? It's like, well, we can go on a date, like we don't have to go on dates like every week, or we don't have to.
Yeah, that's an easy.
Shh. I'm bringing up bad stuff for myself here, but it's like we can go on a date and then it's like, yeah, maybe you can go on a date once every 6 months, and the relationship is generally fine, and you can. But how much better would it be? How much stronger would it be if you did have consistency
and intentionality?
Yeah.
That.
So I have regular phone calls with 3, 4, or 5 of my friends, or regular texting, but it's intentional. It's not just that I want to all the time. Sometimes it's like, oh, I should do this. And then you're always happy once you do. Okay. Our next scripture from Proverbs 25, chapter 25, verse 20 and 27:14, which reads, like one who takes away a garment on a cold day. I love this scripture. Or like vinegar poured on a wound is one who sings songs to a heavy heart. If anyone loudly blesses their neighbor early in the morning, it will be taken as a curse. All right, so you're taking a garment away from someone on a cold day and pouring vinegar on a wound, right? Those are 2 bad things. It's like singing songs to a heavy heart. All right, that's an interesting kind of twist. Yeah. If anyone loudly blesses their neighbor early in the morning, it will be taken as a curse. So what you see here, in short, are these different scenarios of things that we might do to people that are negative experiences in relation to their context. So singing songs to a heavy heart, what that means in this verse is that it's like being overly joyful or cheerful around someone who maybe go through something that's really difficult. I know we've experienced times in our life where we're going through something difficult, and someone came and was metaphorically singing a song in terms of happiness, kind of knowing what we were going through, and it was like missing the context of like, hey, I'm sorry, like we're not in that space. This is like pouring vinegar in a wound.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? I mean, that makes sense for us because we both know what we're talking about. But right, you can be going through a difficult time and someone comes in and they're singing a song and so happy, and it's like, hey, I'm hurting right now. Yeah. And you're just taking away, my coat on a cold day when I'm like suffering or mourning. So that's singing a song to a heavy heart. And I love this. If anyone loudly blesses their neighbor early in the morning, it will be taken as a curse. What a funny phrase, but that's like, all right. So I had a friend in college who I actually have a phone call with him tomorrow that I've scheduled. Oh, nice. Funny enough, Spencer Clark. I just outed him, but he's fine. So I lived with Spencer in college. We were roommates in a dorm our sophomore year, and it was 3 of us in this little room. And it was like bunk beds, and then our friend slept on a futon. And Spencer Clark does not, suffers from a slight amount of tone deafness. And like he's super smart dude, and just sometimes he gets kind of lost in his head. And he had early morning classes, and none of us were like really early morning people, or me and the other roommate weren't. And whenever he would wake up, he would do 2 things that would make me like uncontrollably annoyed, like bad. And he would, first of all, he would wake up and he would sing in the morning. like songs, and it
Okay.
was more tone deaf than that.
Really?
Yeah. and,
You're giving
and it
yourself
would
a
wake
little
us
too
up every
much
morning, and
credit.
it'd be like, you'd wake up and be like, dude. And then that was one thing. And then he would always leave the door open to our dorm room so that there was always noise coming in. Right? There's that like the sometimes inconsiderate things that we all do, but those are two that always struck me as funny, specifically with this. Whereas if you loudly bless your neighbor earlier in the morning, it will be taken as a curse. Um, I think there's something really key in when we're being friends and when we're thinking about what kind of good friends we have, is them understanding the context of our lives and what it means to care for someone or comfort someone or ask for someone's company, or
Yeah.
there's this constant awareness of the other
Mhm.
that we are sacrificing ourselves sometimes for, or we're asking someone else to sacrifice themselves for us in
Yeah.
this season. And it's like, hey, like, I know you're crushing it at work right now, but I just, suffered a major loss in my life.
Right.
Like, can you just come and like, watch movies with me that are sad? Or can you just, can you cry with me? Can you celebrate with me in times? Can
Yeah.
you?
And I think, it's that's a really tricky position because usually the person that's hurting, it, it it's incredibly difficult to even communicate that to others. So I think that there's a responsibility on both ends, right? I think if you're the hurting party, as hard as it is, I think it is putting yourself in a place, a vulnerable position, um, to really trusting your friends and communicating a need, saying, "Hey, like I'm actually going through something very difficult right now. Could you approach me with
That's very hard.
sensitivity around XYZ?"
Yeah.
And that's a vulnerable place to put yourself in because you're trusting the other, and it's a little for me it would be kind of embarrassing to admit, right? It's embarrassing, it's admitting a weakness,
Hmm.
but I think that's a good thing because it's growing the trust of the relationship, but you're also giving your friend an opportunity to meet a need, right? And of course no one can read minds, right? But at the same time too, as a friend on the other side is having that kind of awareness, which I think can be easy to sidestep, that just self-awareness, but then also just being aware of the other, and kind of reading the room in a sense, saying, hey, I know that my friend had just gone through something difficult. Maybe I should ask them, hey, would it be all right if I shared this with you, or would that be too difficult? And I've actually had people do that with me, and I've appreciated it
Mm.
so much. And even though I was in a place to receive good news, it made me feel so cared for that they even asked to begin with before sharing something with me.
Hmm.
So I really appreciated that, and then I gave them permission to do so. Continue, moving forward. Like, hey, update me on this great thing in your life. I want to know about it, and
Hmm.
thank you for asking. Being sensitive enough to ask if, hey, would this be hurtful for me to share this with you?
Hmm. Yeah, and I've seen times in my life too where um, I have something that's like really successful happening, but I know that someone's going through a difficult time, just generally in their life.
Hmm.
Um, and it's not like some one specific big event; it's just they don't feel like they're experiencing success, and you have to have that sensitivity of like, if I'm talking about all these cool things that are happening, or then you're kind of like burying that person deeper to where there's that contrast.
Yeah.
But that means self-sacrifice on some of our part, where it's not something bad we're doing, or it's not braggadocious. It's just, hey, I'm putting the other person before myself.
Yeah.
And so I think that conversely with the scripture is you have one, you give them garments on cold days.
Mm.
Two, you pour something that's appropriate, kind of like uh, medicine on the wounds opposed to the vinegar.
Yeah.
You don't bless them early in the morning, you bless them at the right time, which isn't literally talking about blessing, but there's
Yeah.
like quiet when you need to be quiet, there's loud when you need to be loud,
Yeah.
and so how are we being those people for our friends
Mhm.
who are constantly thinking about the other person and how we can give them a jacket or celebrate with them or just go have fun with them
Mhm.
when those sorts of moments are right, opposed to
Yeah.
what I think can happen in a lot of friendships, which is someone reaches out when something's bad,
Right.
right? Or
Yeah.
someone reaches out, like sometimes people fall into those sorts of relationship habits where someone only reaches out to you when they need something from you.
Mhm.
Someone only, how do you create relationships that are aware of the different contexts of life and responds to all those? If it's good times, bad times, like you're a constant presence.
Yes.
It's not just when you need someone.
Exactly.
Or it's not just when you want to go have fun with someone.
Right.
It's both when you need someone and you want to have fun with someone. It's when you should be sharing your life in all those different ways. Okay, just a few more minutes here. And here is our last verse for the day, Proverbs 27, verses 5 through 6. First, let's jump to some comments here first before we jump into our last verse.
Yes, I'd love to hear him.
Ricky Vera says, many quality acquaintances, a handful of close friends. We can always pick up where we left off. I think that's always a good sign of those relationships. And sometimes we should see, like, could our relationships be stronger if we didn't leave off, if we tried to continue in some way? Because, of course, relationships have those ebb and flows.
Hi, Ricky.
Great to hear from you, Ricky. And he says, great segment. Thank you. Thank you, Ricky. Thanks for joining us.
We miss you.
We do miss you. I miss your notes on the creative,
Yes.
on the creative suite.
Ricky Vera he would come volunteer at the church at specific times and jump into the creative suite, which is where all of our creative team works. And he would leave really kind notes on our whiteboard.
He's the best.
That. We read those notes and we kept them up there for quite some time.
Angelica Glez says, a good friend is so hard to find. Good friends can absolutely be extremely hard to find.
Yes.
And maybe we'll have some tips from Miss Bumble BFF over here before we.
No, but I agree. I 100% agree.
And Lee Ortiz says, people, especially friends, will always say, can I do something or can I help? How do you find a way to ask for help when you are in pain or emotional? So how do you find a way to ask for help when you're in pain, physically or emotionally? I think that is just a great question. And obviously there's so many different contexts that we can find ourselves in our lives, what kinds of friends we have, what age we are, what it is that we're going through physically or emotionally. I can think of a moment in my life that was extremely difficult, and I'm not necessarily the kind of person who wants to call and have like an emotional conversation about something difficult I'm going through.
Yeah.
Though when I meet with my friends, we're very open about, like, this is great, it's terrible right now, but it was like an especially difficult thing where, I'm like on the phone crying about something that's happened to a few of my friends, and I didn't want to have that conversation. And I think that's where we can think about scriptures like these that ground us, is to go, like, I should do things that I don't want to do sometimes because it's the right thing to do. And maybe sometimes that's reaching out to someone and asking, like, I don't want to ask someone for help.
Yeah.
I don't want to tell them how hard things are, but you're just like, this is the right thing to do. I need to call this person because it's the right thing to ask them to pray for me, to help me in some way, to bring me food.
And I think a way to think about it too is, and I love it because your dad taught me this. Anytime we ever went out to lunch or dinner, he'd always treat. And sometimes I would feel really bad. I'm like, no, like I want a treat now. And he's like, no, you're depriving me of the opportunity to be generous. And I was like, wow, that's a really good way to look at it. Because I always felt bad, right? When someone treated me or did something for me, and I felt like I was being selfish, but really I was giving them an opportunity to be generous. And so I think similarly in those kinds of situations, when it feels like you're being a burden to someone else, really, I think that's, not what we should be thinking. I think you should be thinking you're giving your friend an opportunity to be there for you. You're giving your friend an opportunity to be a friend, a true friend. And I would love an opportunity for that. Like I would love an opportunity to grow as a person, to be there for someone else, to know what it really actually means to share one another's burdens. But we keep that. We keep that essential part in relationship from each other when we don't when we're not vulnerable, we don't reach out and ask for help, and share our burdens with one another.
Yeah, definitely. And there's a sense of like, how do you feel when someone actually reaches out to you for help? When someone shares something that's private that they're suffering through, you feel like a meaningful person in that person's life,
and honored.
And you feel honored, and you're like you're ready to step up and do whatever you have to sacrifice.
I've never been in a situation where someone's called me and said, "Hey, I need help," where I'm like, "Oh my gosh, geez," it's always been like, "Wow, like, okay, what can I do? How can I help you?" But I have a ton of girlfriends who would admit this, where they always have said to me, I have such a hard time asking people for help. And so, you know what's funny? Them just telling me that has given me the cue as a friend to, when I'm seeing things kind of crazy in their lives, I go out of my way to say, hey, I know you told me this thing that you say you have a hard time asking for help. What do you need help with right now? I know you need help. And
Yeah.
they're like, you're right. I need this. I need this. So that's another thing to do, even as, being on the other side as well. Just getting to know your friends in a way to even saying, hey, if
Mm-hmm.
that's a weakness of yours, or if that's something you struggle with, well, let me step in and let me prompt you a little bit more and say, hey, you need to be asking for help right now. You can't do this alone.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Okay. Here's a comment from Jack Bull, who's a brilliant PhD student currently at King's College London, the school I'm at. He says, I'd highly recommend Nick and McKeon Ethics, Book 8 by Aristotle. His exploration of friendship would aid so many. Interesting, Jack. I've read Nick and McKeon Ethics. I don't remember Book 8, so I'm going to trust that is a helpful exploration of friendship. So I encourage everyone to Google that after this. Just Google Nick and McKeon Ethics, Book 8. I'm sure it's publicly available as a resource. Would be my guess. You can find a PDF online or purchase the book. It's always a great book to have on your shelf, a classic. Okay, our last verse, very short comments on it, is Proverbs Chapter 27, verses 5 through 6. Better is open rebuke than hidden love. Wounds from a friend can be trusted, but an enemy multiplies kisses. Better is open rebuke than hidden love. Wounds from a friend can be trusted, but an enemy multiplies kisses. I love how Ben, our executive pastor, put this past Sunday in church, where he says it's better to be stabbed in the front than to be stabbed in the back.
Yeah.
And I think this is just obviously so difficult because none of us want to be stabbed in any sort of
In any
way.
way, yeah.
And I think that in a lot of our relationships in contemporary society, and maybe this has existed prior, but this is vocalized very clearly, is that when we're thinking about a spouse or a romantic partner, when we're thinking about friends, we immediately say we want to be with someone who accepts us as we are. That is often the first phrase that you hear
Right.
when you're talking about, who do we want to be with?
Right.
And in a sense, of course, that's true, right?
Mhm.
Your quirkiness, your oddities, you don't want to have to become an entirely new person with a new identity and facade
Right.
in order to meet someone's expectations. But I think that at a much deeper level, we want someone who accepts us and loves us for who we are, while they don't accept where we are and they're ready to push us somewhere greater.
Yeah.
And I think that this sense, our understanding of who God is, has also distorted our understanding of who our friends and our, romantic, our husbands or wives should be. In that we've often looked at God, and this is influenced by, a lot of different theology and understandings of Scripture, where we look at God as just the God who's kind of like, hey, hey, you're messed up, but that's okay.
Right.
And it's like, well, no. Like, yes, like if you put your trust in God, then he accepts you. We won't get into all those kinds of details. But if you put your trust in God, he's going to accept you, but he also calls you to something
Right.
higher.
You come as you are, but you don't stay that
Yeah,
same way.
precisely, as people will frequently say. And so, but we'll often avoid friends who are pushing us to go
Yes.
somewhere higher than where we are now, or that's challenging us with the issues that we might have. And so sometimes we can have friends who are just those who are flatterers. They're just constantly flattering you. They're making you feel better about who you are. Maybe they're staying with you at where you are in life at this level.
Which, from that original scripture 18:24, that's that first kind of friend.
Mm-hmm.
Because
Yeah.
you're giving them something, right? There's
Yeah.
a gift. That gift is flattery.
And instead, we should be looking for the person who's challenging us to go further and who is openly doing that. And I think covertly doing that, and that they are an example of someone that we respect. And so they're challenging us to do more just by way of their example. But also, maybe they're having hard conversations where it's like, yo, you're watching a lot of Netflix lately, bro. like, dude, what's the last book you've read?
Yeah.
What have you been reading in scripture lately? What's your prayer life been lately? And I have friends that meet different needs for me in different areas. Some that are more like professionally challenging, some that are more emotionally challenging, some that are like will ask me every single time, how's your prayer life been lately? What have you been reading in scripture? And then they'll confront me if
Right.
if I'm not where I should be.
Right.
And that's like a stab in the front,
Yeah.
it's someone who's actively rebuking in the positive sense
Right.
who I might be, but it comes from love. They're looking you in the face. They're
Yeah.
not talking to other people about what you
And
should
that's
be.
a valuable friend. You want to hold on to that. And oftentimes though, it is tricky because being that kind of friend can lead to a lonely road. There's a lot of times where people just they don't want a profound friend. They
Yeah.
want the first kind of friend in many of them. But that's why I think the number comparison in that scripture, it says there's way more in the first kind of friend and there's a lot fewer in the second kind of friend. But I think that shouldn't deter us from being that kind of friend to others. And oftentimes that has, even for me personally, that's been a lonely road. I've lost friends because they didn't want to hear truth in a way that even if you're trying to communicate it in love, they didn't want to hear it. They didn't want to hear it. And sadly, years later, they would circle back around and say, "Hey, I wish that I had listened to that
Yeah.
piece of advice, or I wish that I had taken that."
Mhm.
But that's not something I want to experience. Right? I'm sad that happened, but at the same time, what kind of friend would I be had I compromised the truth? Right?
Mhm.
To me, that's an example of what love actually is when you are truthful with that. And Ben mentioned that last week again in his message. He said, you've got consistency with friendships and you've got candor.
Yeah,
And I
those
think
are
having that reciprocal candor is so key.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, a few questions for all of you to think about as we finish up today. What kinds of friends do you have? Do you have a lot of them? Do you have a few of them? How close are those friendships? Do you have friends who wound you in the positive sense? Do you have friends that will, talk to you to your face about things that might be wrong? Do you have friends that stick closer than a brother? Do you have all some of these few different questions that we have addressed today? I encourage you guys to think about, to meditate on, and to assess what it might look like to develop deeper relationships and friendships in your life, and to not think that those can sit by the wayside. Those are so key
Yeah.
to our relationships. All right. Thank you all so much for joining us. Thanks for everyone who's jumped into the chat
Yeah.
and offered some meaningful comments for us today. And also a big thanks to Mrs. Amanda Smith for joining me on our weekly coffee convos.
Thank you for getting my title correct.
Mrs.
it's
That's your life title,
my
Mrs.
it's my pleasure. I love jumping in here when I can.
Awesome. All right. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a great week. Join us next week, 9 a.m. Eastern Time, YouTube Live, Facebook Live, and we'll continue our conversations, especially as we jump into Advent season for Coffee Convos. All right. Peace, everyone.
Bye.